Howdy guys and gals, welcome back to the Social Regressive, where we're continuing to test 224 diameter bullets against ballistics gel. Not just at close range like a lot of people test. No, we're starting at 100 yards and then we are working our way back to see how these perform in realistic scenarios. We've gone out hog hunting before and our closest shot on any of these has been right around I think 150 yards, and then they kind of stretched out just a little bit from there. We did have problems with the bullet that you're going to see behind me right here. This is a BTHP Match bullet, 75 grains. I was figuring that this would probably work pretty well for hogs since it does have, pretty high sectional density. It's, a little bit longer bullet. It's going to be carrying more energy downrange. But I think the problem that we were running into is that these were behaving like FMJs, like full metal jacket bullets, and that they were just cruising right through the target. If they were tumbling, they might have actually been tumbling just after they left the other side of the animal. We're going to find out here today and see how these perform, especially at different distances. I'm kind of curious to see how these work. We've been contrasting these with the Speer Gold Dot bullets. That's a 55 grain, a 62, and a 75, and those have all been performing really well in the gel. Let's see how these do. The hollow point that you see should not actually perform like a hollow point. It's not designed to. This should actually act like an FMJ. That's one of the reasons why these are just fine for the military to use in some of their specialty rifles like the Mark 12. So yeah, these are, it's a wonderfully efficient bullet. As you can see, it has a boat tail, it has a really long seek and ogive. The powder that we're using is Alliant 2000 MR. This performs a lot like Reloader 15. It should have the same burn rate, but this has all kinds of special tricks up its sleeve. Like, it should be very consistent in all kinds of temperatures and different conditions that you might have. And so far it's been working very well with all of the bullets that we've been playing with, any weights at all. This is going to be my go-to powder for 223 from now on, I think. This is a real shocker, you guys. I'm sorry for the overlap on some of these shots. I'll point out which is which. I had a scope mount come loose. I was hoping to keep these a bit further apart, but yeah, we kind of clustered them up. But here's what happens. The BTHP Match is this light-colored, thin wound panel path right here, and you can see that it goes about 2 inches, and then it suddenly flares out in a big way. It looks just like those gold dots, except how long it takes to actually open up. And it has a gigantic wound channel not too far in. You can see that the bullet has also, despite its heavy weight, it has come to rest at about 14 inches and has separated into 2 parts. So back, let's see, right back in there, that is the lead core down inside there that has mushroomed beautifully. And this is the jacket that has separated. And here's the wild part, guys. I keep hearing about how these bullets are supposed to not act like hollow points. They're supposed to act like FMJs. Nope. At least at these speeds at 100 yards, this has acted just like a hunting FMJ. And this would produce a massive wound channel. So I guess here's the big thing. Maybe this isn't big enough for hog, maybe 223 overall. I just can't really do it, but no, I've seen video to prove otherwise. And it looks like these bullets perform right in there with some of these gold dots. Sorta. You can see that it does dump all of its energy relatively quickly. Big wound channel. Overall, the gold dots mushroom much more quickly, so I think they're apt to cause more damage up close, and especially if you have game that isn't so big that it's not going to be wasting energy. Yeah, it should. All of these should perform actually quite well. I'm shocked. Coming in just a little bit past 13 inches, we have the Hornady BTHP Match. I was shocked by this. These actually do work like a regular hollow point. You can see the jacket right there that has been emptied of its core, and the core is nicely flattened out. This has a bit of a squished shape. We'll see it here from the side. It's very wide and kind of flat. There's the core, or the jacket. And you can see that this performed very similarly to the 55 grain Gold Dot that you see right there. Almost the same distance, and the wound channel actually looks very similar as well. I actually shot these right next to each other, and they're overlapping just a little bit, but you can still get a pretty good idea of which is which. The 75 grain waits about 2 inches before it starts opening up, so there's a big difference between the Gold Dot and the 75 BTHP. So yeah, this one starts to open up, and it's very dramatic. It's about that same 1 inch in width all through here until it finally starts settling down. As you get up toward like 9.5 inches, it starts to really turn into a narrow channel. So its performance is actually very similar to that 55. I think the 55 overall is better, but it's interesting to see that while I was expecting the 75 to perform more like an FMJ, it really didn't. It doesn't so much tumble. It does act like a hollow point. It opens up, and it dumps a whole lot of energy pretty early on. So, using this out hunting hogs actually wasn't that bad an idea, but I think just the fact that we can start causing damage earlier with the Gold Dot is a good reason to go for it over the other. One other thing that I should point out is that the Gold Dot's held together in all of the shots that we have through this gel, but when it came time to shoot the BTHP Match bullets, these tended to leave behind artifacts. So there's a nice chunk of copper that you see in the wound channel right there. We also have some little ones that have sheared off and created these little channels off to the side of the main one. So yeah, these do tend to break apart, and the Gold Dots do not. At 200 yards, I managed to get 2 hits on the block with the 75 grain boat tail hollow points, but unfortunately both of them blew right out the side. So I wasn't able to capture the remains, but you can see that these are performing actually even better at 200 yards than they were at 100. Instead of taking a while to take off, these actually have blossomed quite a bit here at the beginning, and we're looking at somewhere between 3/4 inch to 1 inch wide tracks carved through here, and they're maintaining some of that damage for some of these longer distances. And you can see that just like in some of the past performances that we had at 100 yards, it is peeling chunks off. So we have some little bits of copper that are in these channels. But I think that these will be solid performers again out at 200 yards. The match bullet that we pulled out of the gel, as you can see, looks very different from the Gold Dots that we had here, which have this uniform expansion, and they have the little cuts to make sure that it, kind of is a uniform shape overall. This one is kind of a mess. So we do have a mushroomed jacket, and you can see down inside where the core used to sit. And then this is the core itself, which, okay, you can see the shape of the core and how it used to sit in there. And instead of a uniform kind of mushroom shape, we have this weird kind of sideways squish. It did make quite a mess, as you can see. Let's see what kind of dimensions we're working with here. Along this kind of narrow axis, we're looking at 475 thousandths across. Yeah, it's kind of hovering around 475 thousandths. This one's a little bit trickier to measure just because it kind of includes that core. I'll try to exclude that as much as possible. But we are definitely over 1/2 inch, so yeah, we're looking at about 540 thousandths, somewhere in there. We started out with 75 grains. Let's see how much these chunks add up to. 62.4. So there's a good bit of lead that we were able to pull out, lead and copper, but you saw all those little chunks that we left in the wound track. These BTHP Match bullets always do really well for me. I have a 1 in 8 twist rifle, and then the one that we shot in this test was a 1 in 7 twist. And this comes out to be just a tad over 1 inch across. With my other rifle, depending on how I have it set up, and usually shooting, I think, a Varget or Reloader 15 in there, I can get about a 3/4 inch group. And I've had this one tune in a little bit tightly as well. But you can see that, yeah, we have a 2-shot, a hole right there. And really, these are all pretty tight, nothing crazy across any of the axes. And really, you know, again, for that lightweight rifle, this is plenty. This is going to get on target at all kinds of distances. And even with that 75 grain BTHP, I can definitely get some damage on game out at different distances. I think that overall, this is probably going to be better for target shooting, but I now know that this will perform pretty well on game at different distances as well. So 100 yards, 200 yards, this is still performing quite well. And even if it isn't, you know, the uniform, beautiful expansion that we get from the Speers, at least that great big stack of 75 BTHP that I've loaded up for defensive homestead and all that is going to actually take care of business if I need it to. I think I'm going to create a whole bunch of these for different purposes out in the future, but it is nice to know that the match bullets actually can get the job done. Thanks a lot to patrons of the Destructive Arts that buy a lot of the products that we use in these videos. They're the ones that buy a lot of the brass and primers and powders and all kinds of other things. They're the ones that keep the lights going. Thank you to Sportsman's Guide and Stan and Mary at the 338 Lapua Magnum level, and thank you to Joseph Davies and Peter at the 300 Win Mag level. And if anybody else wants to chip in $1 or $2 a month to keep these videos coming like a whole bunch of other guys, I'll put a link to Patreon down below. See y'all around. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. Even if you didn't like this particular content, go ahead and subscribe. There's probably something coming that's more up your alley. Check out this playlist right here. This is going to have videos in a similar vein to what you just watched. These 2 videos we cherry-picked for you. And finally, the Social Regressive is on Patreon. So you can become a patron of the Destructive Arts and earn some goodies while helping us to provide high-quality videos just by kicking us a few bucks a month. Thanks a bunch for your patronage.